Welcome back, Fading Memories listeners. Once again, I always appreciate you tuning in and giving us a little bit of your time every week. And this week, with no exceptions like all the other weeks, is an excellent conversation to listen to. With me today is Richie Frieman. He is the author of the book, The Optimistics. It is about a group of people living with dementia who are taking the hopeful and optimistic view of the rest of their lives. And that is something we can all use, whether we have dementia or not. So thanks for joining me, Richie.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So I read most of the book, but I
Mhm.
didn't get, and I always ask all my guests because probably about 97, 98% of my guests are all caregivers. I never found out if you had been a caregiver or not.
No, so I talk about this in the beginning of the book. I mean, my first interaction with Alzheimer's dementia was when I was a young child. I was, just around, I would say like 10, 11, 12 or so with my grandmother, we call Bubby. And that was what I associated Alzheimer's and dementia with. And I think that's what a lot of people really associate with. And at the time, I guess my grandfather was a care partner, and then eventually my father too. But that wasn't even something I had known much about. And then when I met Dennis, one of the optimistics, um, and I really just fell in love with the story and the passion that him and Jim and Mike had, and then everybody else, I realized that the care partner community is something that, I mean, this book I consider to be an homage to not only the optimistics but also to the care partners. It is, I meet with them in the book. I've chatted with them. I also talk to them when we're at our support groups. And it's needless to say, as your audience knows very well, it's not an easy topic. It's not an easy role, but there is, and I like that there's more support for them. I don't think the care partners, I don't think people outside of our communities understand what really goes into being a care partner, a care provider.
Nope, I've learned that through conversations and living that life. It's very interesting. I was recently at a conference for healthcare advocates, and it was really interesting to get pulled out of my deep rabbit hole of Alzheimer's and dementia and learn about other people's diseases and their advocacy and everything. And it was like, wow, there's like this huge world of care partners, sort of like myself, but helping take care of people who have cancers, schizophrenia, multiple sclerosis, like all kinds of things. For a brief
Yeah.
moment, I was like, I don't belong here. I don't have a disease. So I was
Well, I
like,
think I mean, interesting thing I learned about the care partner community is that it is all shapes and sizes. I mean, the roles to be there's, the hierarchy of the roles, the people that are every day and things like that. But what I've learned with me and the optimistics and everybody else I feature in the book, it's that everybody can be a care partner to some degree, and that opens up a way of participating with the person you're caring for, whether it's just a day a week, whether it's, a couple hours every now and then, just checking, relieving a son, relieving his mother so she can have some time out. So when you hang with the father, things like that. There were a lot of people that came in different levels, I should say, of care partner.
so how did you meet Dennis? How did you, he
So
was the first optimistic, correct?
yeah, well, so he was the first up. I'll tell you how they all kind of met, but he was the first one that I had met. Um, so, like I said, my life with Alzheimer's dementia went back to my grandmother and had a very, very big impact on me. My wife's grandmother as well. I've had other relatives go through it, but again, I'm only associating it with elderly. So, one of my best friends, his dad, was had a very bad battle with Alzheimer's towards the end, and we would always do the Alzheimer's walk in Baltimore, where I live in Maryland. And the walk was coming up, so me and my friend were going to walk with his, in support of his dad. But sadly, that summer he passed away, so we walked in honor of his dad with. So it was me. I joined my friend and his parent and his mom and his sister and niece and nephews and cousins. We all came out for him. So before the walk, there's a podium and doing the MC and telling people about different things about the Alzheimer's Association, different things about the community. And a man gets up there, and the minute he got up there, my friend and his mom were like, "Wow, that's Dennis." And I said, "Well, who's Dennis?" And but Dennis was a physician's assistant, and he actually helped my friend since he was a child at the office that Dennis worked at. Was my friend's doctor, and he helped my friend's dad too. And then all of a sudden, he just vanished because he left his career, but they didn't really announce it like that. Anyway, so Dennis gets up to talking, and he had mentioned that he was diagnosed with young onset dementia, and he was lost and confused, as everybody is. And he met two other men that were at a support group for the S Foundation, which stands for Young Onset Education and Support, and the Young Onset Dementia Education and Support. Sorry, YES program. And they basically found a friendship. They never met and they were strangers, but they were all in the same boat. And that's how Dennis, Mike, and Jim decided to dub themselves the Optimistics as a way to get past the pain and suffering they endure with this disease. And that mantra spread on, and other people became optimistics, but that was the three guys that really kicked it off. So after Dennis was done talking, then the walk kicks off. And as a writer, I'm thinking of all kinds of ideas all the time. Like I could be at the gas station and I don't know, see a guy with a funny hat on. I'm like, oh man, imagine if that was and you write ideas down and if some never go anywhere, but I could not stop thinking about this. And it was just beautiful because I was 43 at the time. I'm 45 now. So it was 2 years ago. And when you are looking at that young onset dementia is happening in their 40s and 50s and 60s, early 60s, I was like, I never knew. No one I spoke to after this of my peers had known about this early of young onset. They associated it with, okay, young onset might be in your 70s. It might be in your late 60s, but you associate it with retirement, grandparents, things like that. And it just, I couldn't believe it. And it was also about three men that were willing to talk to each other and lean on each other. And you don't hear about men supporting each other in that manner. And that narrative is changing, but it's slow. And I'm hoping to champion that part too. But I just really fell in love with the idea. And it wasn't so much about how you can stay positive about and optimistic about this disease. It was, how can you add that notion into other parts of your life? And one thing led to another. I reached out to Dennis's wife on Facebook. I was like, look, I said, you don't know who I am. We actually had a couple of friends in and linked together. I was like, okay, that might be a plus. So I said, I'm a writer, and I saw him speak. I said, I just think there's something there. I'd love to talk to you for a little bit if it's okay. So it took a little while, and eventually his daughter reached back out to me and said, my mom sent me your message, and if you want to have a call, it'd be great. So they're very in defense of their dad, which I totally respect. I am a stranger, even though, again, we had some mutual friends or whatever at the time, which I did not know. But so I talked to her, and then we I said what I wanted to do, and they understood the sincerity and what I was trying to work with, and we met with. Then I Zoomed with Dennis and his family, and Mike, Mike lives by himself, and then Jim and his wife and kids, and we talked about it. And I said, look, I don't know where this is going to go. I have no idea what I'm going. I said, but I just, worst case, I can at least you have somebody else to talk to. And then I met other people in the YES program, and it went from a book about 3 people to a book about dozens, and of people living with this of all walks of life. It does not matter how healthy you were, how rich you were, how good looking you are, how tall you are. But and I was when I met all these other people at the YES support group, that part really hit me. Again, you have these stereotypes in your mind of what you think somebody with Alzheimer's or dementia or any other disease that you kind of look up to identify with. And you have an image in your mind. And when they walked in, I had no idea who could have had. I mean, when they walked in with a spouse or so forth, it was all different because the ages were different. It wasn't what I was used to. Very naive in that aspect too. But the first meeting, I remember, we went around the table and everybody said hi to me. I said hi to everybody and stuff like that, and broke up into groups. And I got to spend time with people of the, I'll call them optimistics, but other people in the group, while the care partners went to another room and they had their own session. So, and it was very overwhelming. I felt I was compelled. My mission was to share their story and to show love and respect, but I did not expect what I had gone into. And I remember after we all left, I gave everybody hugs and stuff like that. Everybody's so sweet. And I just got in my car and just cried my eyes out. And I remember I left and pulled over and cried my eyes out. It just really hit me hard. I love these guys now. They're family now. They were strangers then, but even when I looked at what I wanted to do, I'm meeting with these strangers and I owe them everything in my life to make sure that their time spent with me was not wasted and that their stories are told before it's too late. So it's just been a wild journey, and it's ups and downs. But I mean, I'm the beauty of it that I found in talking with people and sharing their stories and having conversations and advocating and things like that has been beyond the reward.
Well, just for the listener's knowledge, the technical definition of younger onset dementia is a diagnosis before the age of 65,
Correct.
which I don't think most people know. I don't know. I've learned that people don't know a lot of things that are just, they're so common for me that they're like almost forgettable, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. Like I've learned so much. I know I've forgotten more than a lot of people know, if that makes sense. And I'm not trying to be, I lived it. I do this every day, so it's
Yeah.
like pretty immersed in dementia and Alzheimer's. My mom technically had younger onset dementia, but she was real good at avoiding
Mm.
a diagnosis until she
Yeah.
was literally mid stage. Like I didn't even know until after my dad died and I took over as her healthcare power of attorney person because I was moving her to memory care, and so I had to do a lot of stuff with the doctors, and I'm like, I need like her diagnosis. I need like the history here because they didn't share that very well with us. And I
Yeah.
was actually really stunned that she was diagnosed in the fall of 2011. And, thinking back, that was like 6.5 years. Thinking back, I was like a blind man on a galloping horse could have told you she had dementia. I'm like, that was like a duh, no kidding.
But
And
you're not alone in that. Everybody gets felt duped, and it is this. Every person I spoke with, in every situation, the person diagnosed, one, denied it, two, put it off, ignored the signs. Now, I will say a lot of it, like they would they'll go to the doctor's appointment, and doctor's like, well, you stressed? You're a lot of work? Like, yeah, I am really stressed. It's like, okay, I mean, your diet is okay. Yeah, I mean, probably could be better. Do you exercise? A little bit, but I guess I could exercise more. And they're like, well, look, take some time. You probably just overstressed, and maybe take some time, and then hopefully it's probably just stress. And the spouse is usually like, or the child is like, this is not the case. Don't let, there's something
yeah,
more here. And they always have to go back. So the denial part is almost recertified by a doctor that maybe it's too early to tell. The signs weren't already there. And also from a person going in there, when you're 55 years old or 50 years old and you are a C-suite person at an office, or you are a doctor or a musician, an engineer, you have a professional life that you've lived forever. And you honestly think that this is going to be dementia? I mean, no one thought it was even on the table. And so it takes a while. And then finally I'd go back and then once they get the diagnosis, how do you face it? And every person in the book, I ask them the same question: what happened after you got the diagnosis? And that's a very difficult topic for them all to answer, because some were just flat out, here's what my new life is going to be. And then some had a much harder time, wrapping their minds around it.
well, I want to hear how they reacted because I think one, it's great for the listeners to hear, but I am
Yeah.
currently dealing with a gentleman in my community. Dog park friend might be the right term.
Mm-hmm.
I've suspected for probably a year or more that he has some sort of memory issue. And last week, so it hasn't even been a week, when his girlfriend, who lives about 2.5 hours away, admitted that he has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's a little confused. He's 77. I think he's 77. I keep getting two answers, 76, 77. So one of the two, close to 77 at least. He thinks he has younger onset dementia. Be I'm not really sure where he's getting that information. I, of course, am not correcting him. I'm working with his girlfriend. Um, an episode right before this one, not the immediate relay, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
a couple back, is on live alones, which is people with dementia living by themselves, which is him.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm connecting her to that past guest because he can't live with her unless she revamps her whole life because she's got a lot of collections, a lot of stuff. And when he's at her house, he's stressed and can't find things. And we all know that that's not good for people with any form of dementia. I don't like clutter. It makes me stressed and my brain is just fine. So I can relate to his stress about living with her.
Yeah.
And we fortunately have a pretty good community here. I reached out to another part of his regular group at the dog park. Be real careful I don't trigger the DOG that's laying on the
Mine's
couch.
behind me too. Don't worry. You might hear him shake his collar.
um, and I'm giving a talk in the next couple weeks on effective communication through the Alzheimer's Association. So I invited this gal to come with me because I think she's going to be instrumental in helping support this neighbor. She said she'd check her schedule. I haven't heard back, so I might have to nudge gently once more to see if she'll come with me. Because you know how the repetitive questions or the repetitive statements just grate on every last nerve. And he's good at doing that to her. So it's
Yeah.
like, I got to train her and I like, oh yeah, yeah. So I'm still a caregiver, even though my mom's gone. I can't believe it'll be, when this episode comes out, it'll be almost 5 years. So that's pretty
Mm.
crazy. So they got their diagnosis. Most people go get depressed. What was, you could pick any of the optimistics, one
Yeah.
of the three. How did they face it and how did they find the silver lining, for a lack of a better term, in this?
Mhm.
Because we all know, I've guests that have had Alzheimer's and they all know what the end result's going to be. So it's
Yes.
kind of hard to be optimistic when that's your looming future.
Well, and that's just it. I mean, I think that the scariest part for this is that there is no cure and they know it. You could be, and I'm not diminishing any other illness whatsoever, but there's a lot of illnesses out there that when you're diagnosed with it, it's a huge hit. But there is a path. People kind of know what to expect. And the probability of life after it is possible. But because there's something out there that could help, there is nothing. So the reality that you know that the time is starting right now, the clock is going, is very scary. And so part of them were more, they were relieved when they knew there was a name for it. Like, okay, this is what's going on. And there is security and understanding that there is a label that you can address and read up with and get help. But the every person that I met with, they looked at it as just it rocked them all. But one of the silver linings is that they knew they didn't do it to themselves. This isn't something they caused. They weren't a smoker and they have lung cancer. They weren't, an extreme athlete and now they have, some kind of they can't move their legs anymore. They're bad back, or there's things that so it wasn't something that they caused. It did nothing about their life that they had lived that had made that. And that was a little bit of a relief, but it was every person was different in the immediate response. And that was my main question. Like when the person says, it's dementia in the doctor's office, like, what is the conversation? What's your emotion right there? I mean, when you get back home and you get in the car, what do you do? There was a gentleman that, his name was Chris, and he in the book, and when he was diagnosed in the doctor's office with his wife, Linda, who's fantastic. And he looked at, he said, just, okay, this is what happens now. And there's nothing he could do about it. And she went home and she had to go get a job and, hasn't worked before, took care of the house. So those things were a bit of a change. Another one was, as a woman named Evie, and her husband, Mark, was a pastor. And that really fascinated me because I, was curious how somebody who has dedicated their entire life to faith, do you ask why me? Do you ask, I've been so good and now it's this, and why you? Why have you done this to me? That kind of thing. And he never really asked that. His form of dementia, it definitely evolved into something else that wasn't always pretty, but he was a man of faith, and he looked at it as, well, this is part of what he has to do. And he did a very good job about trying to still give back to the community and things like that. But the bigger reality for them after their diagnosis, all the things that they're going to lose. And I just don't mean, I don't mean time and things like that, but it's more about they had to quit their jobs. They can't drive. They their roles in the household are switched, and more so for the men, the driving was a very big issue. And I think from a male ego standpoint, look, I'm a guy, and I take care of my family, and I'm the breadwinner, and there's a pride that a man takes, and that's not like being, alpha macho at all. It's just the reality of it's how we all have grown up kind of being, and it's a thing that's been built into every man's mind. And so when they realize that that's not going to be their role anymore, that was hard. I can't drive anymore. The freedom of driving, you can pick up and go anywhere you want, and now you can't, is a huge, huge hit to them. And then also, like, what do I do now? Like, what do I do? What can I do? And
that's a good question.
And that was really what they had faced. It's just, I have no role anymore. What am I supposed to do? And that was something that they all battled with. And that alone creates the depression, the isolation, the stigma, what dementia brings with it, which is something that everybody fights with. And even every person that I met with in the book, I've interviewed over 7 dozen people about, and then featured people in the book, but from care partners to people with living with dementia. And they all felt isolated from friends and family at certain times, because people are afraid what to say. How do you ask? How do they act? What are they going to do? And that really broke my heart too, because I heard many stories about just how people were kind of moving on. And even speaking of Chris and Linda, Linda put it very eloquently that she said her life was like living in a fishbowl. She was swimming around and watching everybody else go on with their lives, and go to retirement, and be able to play with the grandkids, and the weddings, and all those things that you would imagine doing in the next 20 to 30 years is something that takes a new shape. And sadly, a lot of folks that I interviewed, their immediate social circle went away. They didn't get invited to dinners anymore. They weren't in couple gatherings. And that part, to me, that angered me more than irritated me. I was furious, because it was like, here you are, you're in your 50s or 60s, and these are friends you've had for, let's just say 20, 25, 30 years, friends you met from the neighborhood, or, friends from couples you become, and all of a sudden you're considered a liability to go out with. And that just, I felt so bad, because I would never want any one of my friends to not want to be around me if something was happening to me, nor would I ever want them to think I would do that to them. And it was definitely something that was a pattern to everybody in some way, shape, or form. So
I actually have insight into that. And that goes back to the episode on the people living alone with dementia. And the gentleman, I should have looked up his name, the guest, one of the things when he told people what he was doing, that he was helping support these people. And he said, I work with people who have Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia that live alone. They're like, well, that can't be.
Yeah.
They must not have Alzheimer's. I mean, it was just like, because, flat out denial that that's even physically possible. And he interpreted meaning that they only saw like the end stages.
Yes.
They immediately thought, oh, diagnosis, completely dependent, can't do
Correct.
anything on their own.
Correct.
So I think these conversations are really helpful, because, like the gentleman in my community that was recently diagnosed, he wants to know what should he expect? What are the next steps?
Yeah.
Like he was told 3 to 10 years. He's like, he feels very lost, obviously. And, I had to tell him, I'm like, they don't really know. Like, it could be 3 years, it could be 10. My mom had Alzheimer's for at least 20.
Yeah.
So, I don't think he'll get to 20, but he might, the gal that I invited to the talk was kind of trying to help him find the silver lining by saying, okay, well, you're 77. If you live 10 years, you'll be 87. That's old, man. She was kind of pumping him up that way. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know which path is worse, the fast one or the slow one, because 20 years is a hell of a long time to deal with this disease, but my mom plateaued for months, years. She just, it was like her new normal, and it lasted so long that it was very dramatic when a new
Yeah.
dip came. To have to constantly readjust to frequent dips, I don't know. That sounds kind of worse, but shorter than 20 years sounds better. I don't
Yeah.
know.
It's
So yeah, I think we still need to educate people, which is what I'm doing. I'm trying.
And that's, I mean, look, I mean, it's folks like you that are really that are helping to trailblaze the conversation with it. I mean, and you're right. It's that people assume, I will admit, I looked at my 11, 12, 13-year-old brain, seeing my grandmother in that stage and the wailing and the crying, and then seeing her in a nursing home, in a vegetative state, in a bed. It, that was the scary part for me. But then I meet folks here and you realize that there is a good, there could be a longer life there. And again, nobody knows how. I'm not trying to glorify this at all, but just because you're diagnosed one day doesn't mean that you're going to be full blown the next day. It hits people differently. This disease does not pick favorites.
That's
Your
true.
ticket gets pulled, and it is what it is. But that's just the nature of how this goes. But you're correct. That is the first thing people think, and they don't know how to react to it. I don't know if I can give those people a pass or not. If it's your best friend or your family member, I'm very on the fence about it, because I would never let a friend down or a family member down like that. I don't think I could ever dismiss them so quickly without. But I'm learning different. I've learned over the years, and I've seen people pass, and friends and family, and how I was raised and understanding that. But it's the wondering of how much time do I have left, kind of goes back with what do I do now, and I whether or not the better alternative is something pretty quick or something drawn out. That's a question I can answer for
Yeah.
anybody. But I will say that the financial strain, as you probably know, on people that are taking care of a caregiver, a care partner and caregiver taking care of their loved one is something that is borderline highway robbery.
Yep.
The amount of money that is required to house someone and to keep them going, and that can be a very bink strain on people, rightfully so. Especially when it's at a younger age, where again the person who has dementia might be in their 50s, or in the YOD community, you could be in your 40s, 50s, way before retirement, and way before you're thinking about just being able to wake up every morning and roll out of bed, and your biggest decision is what park you're going to take your dog to or something. So it's that's the part that really really stings about that. They can't figure out the why, and that's part of what I asked everybody about, is that what did you do with that? How do you address those questions that you have no answer for, and the doctors have no answer for? And it's just how you have to really reshape. And that's one of the hardest parts I found about this disease, is that you have to reshape everything you've thought about, not only life, but just how you really thought about being diagnosed with an illness. It's scary to know that there is no cure.
Yeah.
And it's not like you're far along and you found out it's too late. It's basically saying it doesn't matter how far along you are, or how long it lasts. And that's very hard for them to understand as well. And again, hurts me really to talk about that and say it, but it's just it's just a sad reality that they have to live with and they have to face.
Well, how did they turn the corner from diagnosis to being an optimistic? Because I think that's, caregiving is it's heavy, and
Mhm.
it alters your life dramatically, sometimes permanently, probably always permanently, but it helps. Like, I read the book. I'm frequently accused of being very negative. I'm just very realistic. I also think people say, well, that you're just complaining, as it's projection. It's like
Yeah.
they're hearing, um I'll make a comment about something in the house that's not working right, and
Mhm.
instead of hearing it as a comment, somebody's hearing it as a criticism because they haven't handled it,
Yeah.
which both are true. It's not either or. So it's I got a lot out of the book because there was some insights into, oh, this is kind of a better way to think about life going forward, dealing with struggles. Like certain things are just taking way too long for my liking. I guess I'm getting that short attention span. I want things to happen right now. So how did they make that shift from being diagnosed and probably at least temporarily depressed to being worthy of this book?
Well, it's funny to say that because when I, when I first started with this book and I'm telling people about it, somebody was like, I was telling somebody about, I was like, went up to dinner with some friends and I'm talking about the book. They're like, all right, look at you, Mr. Optimistic. And I was like, look, let me explain one thing here. I am not Captain Rainbows and Sunshine and everything's a beautiful day. Like that is just not, I mean, I'm not a negative person, but I'm a realist. I mean, I like to think things are going to go better than they are, and I like to think things will work out, but try being a writer for 20 some odd years and you understand it's not exactly you get told no a lot and your dreams are crushed, but it's, so that was thing for me. And it wasn't something where you could expect people like this to do as well. And it's funny because as I'm doing these interviews with people and I would email them and we'd schedule time to talk. And if I could in person, they lived around, I would drive and we'd have like coffee or something, but a lot of it was on Zoom like this. And there's a woman named Shannon, she's a care partner for her mom. And she went to the ends of the earth to make her mom happy. And it was not pretty. And she jokes about it like her mom did not like it, then it was not appreciative of it. Even though she knows she did a really good job. But anyway, so Shannon pops onto the screen. We say hi. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to start to begin now. And then she goes, before we begin, just so you know, I'm not an optimist about this. And I said, I understand. And then you kind of carve out those little moments. And that's really what it comes down to is that when I mentioned before, when they find out, okay, what do I do now? And they realize that it wasn't something they did to themselves. And you really only have two options. You can go into the darkness or you can find some form of light. That is it. And everybody in any situation in your life, dancing in that gray area never really works out. You're either really, really sad about something or you're trying to fix it to make it better. Staying in the gray of worrying just keeps you stagnant. And they were all that. Everybody was depressed and isolated too. I mean, especially Mike. Mike was by himself in Solomon's Island, Maryland, which is basically 2.5 hours from Baltimore, where I am. He's by himself. And a lot of the people are focused in this area where I am. And I thought about Mike a lot, like at home, like, what does he do? I picture Mike sitting on his couch, but he had a good life. I mean, he has a good life. He's still, he lives right by the water. He goes out and he walks on the pier and he is part of a church group and things like that. But so they realize that the support that they have is really determinant of how they're going to live the rest of it. I mean, when they were diagnosed, and this issue where kind of Jim and Dennis and Mike had connected was, here they are, Jim was a CFO of a hospital, looks 6'5", 250. The guy looks like he's like the poster boy for like AARP magazine or like, golf magazine. I mean, good looking guy, real big, 3-sport athlete in college. I mean, he was just everything. And always had a really big figure, a lot of charisma about him. Dennis was a PA. He was a medical professional. He's diagnosed people his entire life. Mike was an engineer. He worked on helicopters. These are people that are bright, strong, independent people. And they go to a meeting for Alzheimer's or dementia, and you walk in there and somebody's in a wheelchair that isn't talking, and they're 80 years old or 85 years old. And when you're 50s, you say, this is not me. I don't belong here. And then what you do, you go back and you say, that's not me. I don't want to deal with this. And you get isolated again and you're pushed back into that hole. So every time it's that battle of getting into the darkness, and they're always been there. And what is it going to take to find those moments and get them out of it? And they all talk about the darkness. I use this phrase now, but they all mentioned it about the darkness. It's the darkness of depression, the darkness of isolation. And it wasn't when they found each other and they realized, wait a second, these people are just like me. I mean, we have a lot in common and we can relate to each other. That really saved them. The feeling of uniformly across everybody I spoke with, feeling that you were not alone is the only reason that they got out of the darkness of depression, isolation. And I understand there are plenty of times in which it goes back. You realize that again, you can't go drive and see your kids anymore that often. You have to always have somebody around, and you realize people are on eggshells around you, and they're worried about you, and then you wish they wouldn't be, and you used to be worried about everybody else. But having support is what I found is the biggest way to find those moments of optimism. And it isn't something that happens 24/7, but I remember when I was speaking with Evie, who I mentioned before, you're trying to capture those moments, and they made sure to find those moments, and because they get fewer and fewer as it gets down the road with this. So those moments are another way to bring you out and find a way to think of that. Look, I know this is a different person. This is not the person who I was raised by, or this wasn't the person I married, but they are the person that is in front of me now. And there's some moments that come back and I'm like, wow, there they are again. That's them. And so it helps. But all about community, all about family love and support. And that's really when I told me about this book and they're like, oh, Alzheimer's, dementia. That's so, oof, I don't know if I want to. I'm like, look, okay. And I talk about the first sentence in my book. It says, no one wanted this book. Nobody, not
That is
agents,
true.
not publishers, nobody, because it was a scary topic. And the irony is that I tell people, I said, look, this is a love story. This is a collection of dozens of love stories in some way, shape, or form. It's a spouse to a spouse. It's a child to a parent to a child in some situations, and a friendship. These are love story. Every chapter in the book is someone else's different story about how they dealt with YOD, through care partner's eyes, or through the YOD, or both. But it is all about love and connection and hope. And that is what really makes this thing work well, or become manageable for everyone. And that's really what it comes down to. So it's a sad topic. We don't need to tell everybody on here that that's the case, but there's a lot of things that are sad that you need to find beauty in. And I think there comes a time and the reason why I was so obsessed with this topic is I don't have dementia right now. I know many people that do. Yeah, I've had people in my family, and now I, of course, know many people that do. But, every time I feel negative about my career or finances or my kids, I'm worried about them 24/7, or can I be a better husband, or can I be a better father, or a better son? All those things you think about, and then how can you have that optimistic mentality of what are you going to do to make that happen? And that's how we really look at it, is how you stay optimistic, even in whatever situation you're facing becomes too heavy and drags you back into the darkness. We all face it. And it's just about being transparent and open about that.
That makes sense. And a question popped into my head and then it popped right back out. I hate it when that happens. Did you find my understanding is generally people with younger onset YOD, their progression is generally quicker than people like my mom, who she kind of straddled the line. She was, like I said, she was formally diagnosed at 69 and a half. So, but she passed away in 2020. So she was halfway through her journey.
Yeah. Wow.
Did you find, yeah, no kidding. I honestly think she started showing signs at age 52. So when I got to be around 52, it was like, yeah, this is terrifying. And
Yeah.
now I'm almost 58. I'll be 58 when this comes out, and so far so good. And most of my listeners know that in addition to my mom with Alzheimer's, my maternal grandmother had vascular dementia. My maternal great grandmother had some form of dementia. So,
Yeah.
and being female and getting older, it's like, man, I'm just stacking up the risk factors here. But
Oh,
I do all the other things to reduce all the risk factors. So was their progression quicker than average, or is that a myth?
so yeah. So, well, a couple of things. One, first of all, I always tell people like this, I am not a doctor. So this book is not a medical book, but it was reviewed by medical professionals, doctors, therapists, people that deal with this 24/7. The stories I talk about to make sure everything in there is factual from a medical standpoint, but we focus really on the shape of the lives. But so to say that it happens quicker, I would say yes, it probably does. And I'll base this off my own self research of being around this for the past 2 years, is that we meet up at the Yes Group every month, and every month there's a change in everybody.
Mm.
Sometimes people don't come. since I started this book, there were I've seen people go into homes, and then when I visited them, it's they're unrecognizable to who they were before. Speaking of Jim was sent into a home earlier in the summer, and he was, I think he's the youngest one out of all three of the original optimistics too.
Mm.
So, or maybe Mike, I think, yeah, he's definitely younger than Den. I know Den's the oldest, but so there are, and every person I've seen in this, their behavior is changing. And I email the families, and if I don't see them, I'll always email them and say, hey, how's things going? Say hi to them for me. Or Dennis lives around the corner from me, ironically. So I try to go see him as much as I can, but I'm also very tentative about my space, even though Dennis is probably the one I'm physically closest to as well. And, it's anytime you want to come over, it's fine. But, I talk to the family and email them, and they're just like, it's not really going, it's not going well. They're declining. And it's really difficult from that standpoint, because, when I go and I see them, I'm trying to notice. I want to, but then again, I don't want to, maybe I'm not, there's certain things that they see. I see them for a couple hours every month, and all together, everybody lives around here. So I have to, obviously I take it from how their full days are living. So it seems to be hitting them more rapidly, but they also come into different manners. Some people, it's the speech, like they're able to like if you looked at them and sat them at across from at a table, you wouldn't know that they're suffering from anything, but they can't speak anymore. Some people have, it's more like almost like a Parkinson's effect to it, where their body is shaking so much. Weight loss is a big thing. And temperament is a thing as well, that kind of weighs and flows here and there. So it's about what is really going to be the one big trigger that kind of, tips it over the edge, if that's a way to say it. But I think with young onset, they seem to notice things a lot quicker, because they're so used to having this person as vibrant as they were before. And you notice things more, that maybe you, in a person who's in their, late 70s or 80s, you almost expect it. You're like, oh, well, yeah, their hips bothering them. Okay. Well, or they can't stay up very late or something like whatever like that. Right. I mean, it's almost like you find it acceptable. So maybe you're not as picky, but it's more dramatic because they are not a person they knew a year ago, let alone a month ago. So
I do know also, because you mentioned all of these men, one was a physician's assistant, one worked on helicopters,
mm-hmm.
one was a chief financial officer.
Yeah.
So these are all pretty high level jobs. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
disparaging any others, but people with a higher intellect generally have more um, coping mechanisms. And when they run out of those coping mechanisms, and then it's almost like a fire hose of symptoms hitting them, their loved ones, their friends. So it's that's got to be worse in YODs, because you're kind of at the peak of things, and then all of a sudden, wham.
Well, that is a very good point, and that is something that, I mean, you think about. I mean, people always think, oh yeah, by the time I'm 30, I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm going to have a high level job. It's like, okay, buddy, we all think that. Wait till you don't really hit your peak until you're like, late 40s, 50s. Like, when you get to be to where in your career, if you're a lawyer, you got, in it for 20 some odd years. If you're a doctor, you're not even getting out of there until your late 30s anyway. So, but, and that was a big thing. So for them, you're right, is that whole idea that how can this be happening to me? Look at, I've worked my entire life. I'm here and I'm in charge of people, and I'm responsible for stuff. It's the last thing they want. So who knows how long they got away with hiding it before someone said, there's something. But then, something would happen. They'd be like, no, it's not that. And eventually those things, like you said, it all hits, because in their mind, they're finally admitting it. But also the people around them are like, oh my, yes, I remember this. And then what about that? And then you did this. And it all just kind of comes in, and it adds a lot of stress and anxiety to them. But it is something that just kind of comes. But I do think that it's part of the denial aspect of it, which I'll admit, if I was them, I probably would too. It's not something you're thinking about, right? I mean, you could go online and Google every sign of symptom you'd have and find 1,000 things that it might be for the reason why you can't remember the meetings, or you can't, you're a stutter, you become the stutter, or you certain headaches or whatever. You'll be happy with whatever you find as long as you're okay with what you find. So the denial part elongates this disease, and the point that when they finally know it, everything starts to unravel, and they start to let go of certain things, and then it really, things that they were able to hide and hold back start to come to the surface.
Yeah. And I think my mom went through denial because she knew how her mom was. She
Yeah.
didn't want to end up like her mom. That was a fun conversation when she told me, "Well, I don't want to end up like my mother."
Yeah.
I was like, "Well, murder is illegal, so I don't know what the hell you think I'm gonna do." It's kind of like, you know. And we were at our place of business, so it was like, this is not going well. So there was that denial, like I don't want to end up like my mother. I'm going to
Yeah.
ignore all these issues, to the point where I think she actually got agnosia, which I think I pronounced it closely.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know what you don't know. And what I found interesting with my mom was in 2008, so the summer of 2008, she went through all the testing to donate a kidney to my dad, and she was rejected because of cognitive impairment. And
Mm-hmm.
so I thought, aha, we finally have a diagnosis. So after my dad died in 2017, and I found out she was diagnosed in, like October of 2011, I was like, what the hell? What happened to the whole, we can't donate a kidney? So the medical profession has a lot to learn, because I know people that have been diagnosed with depression, anxiety, adult onset ADD,
Yeah.
and a lot of the symptoms look like that. This is not a criticism of doctors. They don't have, the magic 8 ball that'll tell them exactly what it is. That's why they call it practicing medicine. And it's difficult once you've gone down that path to get, so now you're on the mental health path, and now you got to
Yeah.
get them off that one and onto, this is actually a disease path. So it's just a challenge, but
And but that you're correct. And that's it. You're interesting when you mentioned adult ADD. That was something that a lot of people that were diagnosed with. And again, they would all take that. That's fine. Because you know why? I can still drive. I can still work. I can still live my life. And I'm not going to be sitting on my couch wondering what's next, which they ended up doing. So they were looking for anything other than what it was. And I want to say pretty much every person there was had several doctor's appointments that until it finally clicked. And I think the conspiracy theorist in me is not really a conspiracy theorist, about this, but I'm only really about this stuff, is that it's, um, the doctors don't want to admit it, because that means that if they're wrong, the person could sue them, or if they're right, then they're going to get it. I think the financial aspect of it from an insurance and medical practice, I think, is one big worry for them. And again, I am no doctor. I never will be. I am not a math or science person at all.
me either.
I love doctors, but I can't. Again, it's I don't know how they would diagnose people, but I think that goes back down to what you and I are doing, is the education part, and how to look for things and how to notice things. And I'm at this standpoint now. If I went to my doctor and they said, "Look, I don't know if it's this, but I'd like to run a test. Is that okay?" Have at it. Whatever you think, I trust whatever you think. I'd rather take it, pay for it, if my insurance doesn't cover it, but then to know than not. And I think that, and that's just, look, I'll give me any test you want, as much blood as you need to borrow for whatever it is. But it's, and I think that part is, that's only if somebody's willing to do that. And sadly, not a lot of people are, on both sides, I should say, right? You want your answer, you get out of there. But interestingly enough, there's a woman in the book named Lauren, and Lauren is really sweet. She's probably maybe now, I want to say she's maybe 50, I want to say, or maybe a little bit. And so she's very deep into her diagnosis, and she has a very interesting version of dementia. And I'm going to butcher it by saying, without looking at my book, and I don't want to distract it, but basically it messes with her vision and her comprehension of what she's really seeing as well. So for example, she would, when I was interviewing her and we're Zooming, we're in the middle, I already met her a couple of times. We had time to Zoom. And I talked to her for like an hour and a half that day or something. And we're talking to be like 20 minutes in. She goes, "Are you in the shower?" And I said, "What?" I was like, "No." She goes, "Oh, I thought you were in the shower." And mind you, we've still been talking. And she goes, She goes, I think it's PPA. It's still here. And she goes, that just happens. Okay. And we stepped tall. We laughed, kept on going. And then like maybe like a half hour after that, she goes, are you on a bicycle? And I'm like, yes, I'm on a bicycle in the shower. And she's like, no, she goes, again, I just, for some reason. And one of the biggest things for her was that, she would be driving and she would slam on her brakes like inches away because she was not seeing. And that was a big thing for her too. But the person that diagnosed her was her gynecologist because she knows having with her. So she thought, well, yeah. So let's just say and the thing was, it wasn't until she said something that brought it up because she thought maybe she was going through menopause or it's hormonal or that she was, stress or whatever it was. So she had to check up and she was talking to the doctor about it. And the doctor said, do you have a problem putting on your clothes? She said, yes, I do. And that was something that was a big deal. He goes, you have to go to see a neurologist right away. And he was correct because one of the signs of her form of dementia is that their vision and the things she's seeing it was the mind fighting the eyes. So she would tell me that she goes, I was putting on a jacket one time and I'm at the dinner with my parents and I know my arm goes in the sleeve. I know it does. I'm saying my arm goes here and I just can't do it. And she's got like one arm in and she's trying to, but again, her body is not letting her do it. Her brain is not letting her do it. And her father goes, your arm goes in there. He goes, and then she said a cuss word to her, I know where it goes. And then she said one time she was trying to put a shirt on and it was like not a workout shirt, but it's a shirt where the back was kind of open more. She goes, I know the front and the back of the shirt. So she's laying it down on her bed and she puts it on backwards. And then she picks it up again. She can't put it on. She's yelling at the shirt on her bed saying and it was very expletive filled in a funny way. We laughed about it, but I won't say it here, but it was something that I would sit there and I'm yelling at my shirt. I'm telling that shirt I'm going to put it on and I can't do it. So, but the part about her story, apart from the medical part, is that it took one person to ask this question that no one had ever thought to ask. And he was right. He saved her life. So
he obviously had to have had a connection to Alzheimer's. Yep. I have a past guest. She wrote the book Still Me. Her name's Rebecca Cobb. She was the only person I've ever heard be diagnosed almost instantaneously. She went to her general physician for regular checkup. And just to back up a step, we were talking about testing and everything. There is a blood test. I think it's still pretty new, but that is something general physicians can use if they or you suspect that there might be some form of dementia, and that would greatly improve the process. So, going forward, I think we just need to be like, yo, do you have this blood test? Like, I have a brand new general physician. Well, he's a general physician, but he's a doctor of, what is it, osteopathy? He's not an MD, he's the DO. I always get the O part wrong. And when I went and saw him, I politely chastised the entire organization because, you got to fill out the family history of diseases. Guess what wasn't on that list? Nothing.
Dementia wasn't?
No. Wow. I was like,
that's crazy.
I was kind of pissed, actually.
I would have written it in like marker, really big. And
I think I probably did. Maybe I should double check. I need to fill that form out again. This was when I was dealing with the only bout of COVID I'm ever going to have. Went 4.5 years, so we're not going to do that again. Anyway, so Rebecca went to her general physician. They ask, oh, are there any changes, anything you're concerned about? She's like, yeah, well, I've been sleeping a lot more lately. And I got kind of twisted up and got a little lost getting here. 99.9% of physicians are going to be like, okay, you weren't paying attention. You missed the turn, you missed the driveway, whatever. I freaking do that all the time. Yeah. Partly I have really bizarre vision, so I can relate to the gal that you were talking about. But her doctor was like, I think you need to see a neurologist. She saw a neurologist. This woman was diagnosed in months from going to the general physician to having a diagnosis. And she was a like college president. So she had to retire, same thing as your people. And she took on all of the lifestyle changes that are supposed to help improve. And I promise you, if you watch the YouTube video or listen to the audio, you will not know that she had Alzheimer's. I had hiccups with her, like with scheduling. We did our little pre-chat and that went fine. And then it was like 3 times of not getting connected for the recording. And trust me, nobody gets to a fourth time.
Yeah.
She did. And it was great. I'm glad I put up with it. But yeah, I think the more the average medical professional deals with people with Alzheimer's or other form of dementia, it'll start filtering up that possibility will start filtering up, and then they can use the blood test. So we just got to make sure that we keep them on their toes with this. And
Yeah.
I always suggest care partners when, especially in the beginning, write down what's going on, date,
Yeah.
time, why you think it's weird. Take some video if their gait is different, or they're cursing at their workout shirt. I have a couple workout shirts that are almost curse worthy because they're
yeah, mine are because they don't make me look as good as I want to be. That's why.
There's that, yeah. But then there's also, they make ladies' tops all cute, which is great. But when there's 15 straps and you got to figure out the arms go through these, and yeah, it's complicated.
It's interesting, but you make a good point about the family history. I mean, when it was, you're dealing with people that right now, I mean, even like my parents' generation, when they're 70s and 80s, and it's that, they don't, back with my grandparents, they didn't keep track of their medical records, and their grandparents, in my situation, they came from Ukraine. So they had nothing with them, let alone nothing to really have, this is 100 some year, whatever years ago it was when they came, and that 1950s or 1920s or early turn of the century, but you didn't need medical records. So, and didn't even know who their relatives were. So you have no idea to track this down. And even like my grandfather's generation, no one spoke about that. A lot of people didn't know, you don't have money to diagnose, or you don't have insurance back then, or, everybody's different. And then even with my dad, and well, what did grandpa have? I don't remember. I know he had this, he had that, but, and then, tracking down cousins. So I think now it's become a little bit more acceptable / regular to understand. Oh, people are really more eager to understand, okay, what about my family history? What did my grandparents have? And, unfortunately, it's probably like, people around, are people that are focused on this kind of stuff, and our generations that want to focus on and share it. But, it's that's the hard part too, is that you never even, when you're looking at that check mark, how many people they probably missed dozen things on there that they didn't realize they had: heart disease, blood disease, a form of cancer, dementia, that they didn't know they had. So that makes a diagnosis of anything really hard if you can't, map it back to somebody else.
Yeah, I had forgotten that my paternal grandfather, so my dad's side of the family, diabetes everywhere. All men, though, interestingly. But my paternal grandfather, he died from heart failure of some sort. I mean, I think it was a heart attack, because he was literally doing this crossword. My Nana said, "Are you ready to go?" She was taking him to dialysis, and he put his pen down and said, "Yep, I'm ready to go," and bam, hit the floor dead. I mean, that's one way to go. It's much better than Alzheimer's. But I forgot, because I'm thinking that side of the family, diabetes, kidney problems, blah, blah, blah. My husband's like, "You didn't write down that he died from heart attack?" I'm like, "No, I guess I forgot that part." So I really should refill out that form. But we could probably talk for another hour, which I always like. But I had a question, and you were talking about support. And I know the gentleman in my community doesn't want to talk about it. He doesn't want to go to support or therapy or anything. It's still very early days. So, we're kind of, his girlfriend and friends that care about him, we're kind of hitting him a little hard with everything he should do. How would you suggest the why of support? Like, he lives alone, he's having to sell his business, so he's very similar to the men you've dealt with, just older. If you could offer him a little piece of advice, like, things will be better when you do support, because, what would you tell him?
Well, I think that also, first of all, I mean, might be news for everybody, but men are a bit stubborn. So they don't want to ask
ladies too.
Yes, they don't ask for help. But you got to look at it here, where it's, what are the two options you have? You have not going to get support or talking to somebody, or you do. One will absolutely be better for you. It may not be the cure, but it'll be better. One will not. And if, we stress about just give it a try, or is there somebody that can talk to? Take baby steps. I mean, it's the problem with therapy or talk and support is that if you don't find a fit for you, you automatically reject it. And, if he goes to a group and he doesn't feel comfortable, he's gonna be like, this is why I didn't want to come here. I told you this is not me. So I think one way to really help out is if there could be somebody else that maybe could make more of a connection with him. And this goes for anybody, and they could help introduce it and talk about something slowly, over coffee or just a phone call or things like that. And hopefully that one person becomes another person or becomes a longer conversation. If people really want help and they're going to enjoy it and see the results of it, I think they'll go after it. If somebody chooses that this isn't the route they go, you can't force them to go. But, we all realize that, life, it comes at us all in all kinds of different ways. And this disease teaches everybody. And Dennis tells me this, time is important. That's the mantra we use. He wrote that to me in an email and it broke me. And I keep it on, actually I have it in my book. So he wrote this email and I keep it in a piece of paper. And you can see it. It's backwards, but it says time is important.
It's not backwards to me, so that's good.
Okay, good. So he wrote that in an email and I wrote it down. I have the date. I stick it on my office, right on my desk. I look at it every day. And I have it in my book when I go to give talks. But you realize all the time you spent wasting and holding things off that are really important that could save your life for another day or another month or another year. There's really only two choices you have, and it's that you stay in the darkness or you come out. And I think that for a gentleman like this, it's that life is going to be much better if he takes a chance in opening up a little bit. And it may just be that one time, who knows? But somebody's got to really rock it into him, like, okay, just give it a shot. Well, what's it going to hurt? Hopefully there's somebody can match with them though, that really pulls them out. I mean, again, Jim and Mike and Dennis. Mike, when Dennis met, when they went at somebody's house for the first time at this Yes group. It was at Kathy's house, who I mentioned before. Mike says he drove by the house like 3 or 4 times. He didn't want to go in. Mike was still driving at the time. And he goes, I was so nervous and so anxious. I didn't want to go in there. And he goes, I opened the door and there's Jim, this big, tall guy. And he's like, hey, Mike, come on in. And Mike says, after that, he calls him his lighthouse. And he goes, after that, I knew I was okay. But had he just kept on driving back to his hotel, because he lives a little ways away, he never would have gone. So, it doesn't hurt to give it a shot.
I think that's what I'll tell him. I'll tell him straight from the horse's mouth of people living with this disease. That's what he needs to do. And I just gave a talk in our community to the Sons in Retirement, and there's a lot of them supporting people living with dementia. So I think I'll reach out to their president and say, hey, here's the scenario. Can we connect him with somebody that might be able to help him? Because they're same age group. I think you have to be 70 to be a Sons in Retirement. I don't know. I'm not a son, never will be. And I don't know. I'm a Gen Xer. Not sure retirement's ever going to be an option. So they're probably not a group. Yeah, probably not a group I'll be able to join. So this has been fantastic. The book is great. Like I said at the beginning, I don't think that I think negatively. Like you said, I'm just a realist. That's like I can see the mistakes I'm making. Like there's things that I would like to be changed. I'm just going to have to make those changes. I can't wait for it to happen. And like I said before, reading this book gave me some new perspectives on better ways to think. And so I think that's great for caregivers and maybe people who are living with the disease that can still, the chapters are short enough that earlier stages of the disease, they can probably still, read each story individually and benefit. So they don't have to sit down, read it in a whole weekend like I did. That might be
I appreciate that. That means a lot to me. It really does. It really means a lot. And hopefully everybody that's listening, can take a chance, take a look at it and see what they think. And hopefully they can find a little bit of that optimistic mentality, even for a moment.
Every moment matters, right?
It's true.
Well, you guys all know where to find the link. It's in the show notes. So just click on the little hot link and go right to the book, and you can order it or get it on Kindle or however you get your books, and put a little more optimism in your days.
Great. Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much. You're welcome. Fading Memories is also available wherever you get your podcasts.